part of humanity, of society at large, of culture. And the storyteller takes on many forms, many shapes. But nonetheless, the storyteller in many ways was the original historian. We've gotten away from that and separated the disciplines out. We somewhere along the line began caring about the difference between fact and fiction. So it has taken on these many roles, but nonetheless, the storyteller remains an important part of humanity. And the reason why is that the storyteller is the one who inspires us, who gives us a glimpse of a life other than our own, who gives us a glimpse of the nobility that could be, of the terror and horror that could be. They give us inspiring stories of other people just like us, so we don't feel quite so alone. There's so many expressions. It's fascinating, quite honestly. But the importance of the storyteller goes beyond just that. It's the imagination. It's what allows those of us who are not quite so creative to push forward and go, well, I hadn't looked at it that way. Maybe we need to start looking at the logical world, the rational world, the real world, from a slightly different perspective. So many quotes from Albert Einstein aren't actually from Albert Einstein, but there are a few quotes where Einstein talks about imagination being more important than science and calculation and all that kind of stuff. And once again, I haven't done quite the research on exact quotes here, but many quotes do not actually belong to him. But the idea still is that without the imagination, without that internal creative self, we tend to box ourselves into these subsets of rules and these expectations of reality, when sometimes we just need to step outside the box a little bit and look at it from another angle. I remember a science article from a few years back. They figured out that they could tell whether a Tyrannosaurus Rex was a female or a male through bone samples, but it wasn't a paleontologist or an archaeologist that was able to determine this. It was somebody who I believe was a microbiologist or something, and through the bone sample she could see how the osteocytes had been reacting, which was indicative of it being a female specimen. But it took thinking outside of the box, a cross-disciplinary examination, to figure out that piece, because this one discipline didn't cover it all. I love it when people call me when I'm talking. One moment. It's never important. So I find it fascinating that being able to step into the creative mind, being able to step across disciplines, sometimes allows us to step forward within martial arts. I was a fantastic Kempo practitioner, and yet it fell short in the face of other things. And as I started training with other people in other disciplines, I found that these cross-cultural or cross-disciplinary studies actually allowed me to advance what I knew at my foundation then, to bring it into something else and to evolve it into something much better. And this is all thanks to this idea of having people keeping record, having people passing on these traditions. It's not just this mechanical thing. It's very important that these stories and traditions are passed down. And you'll remember I said a few weeks back, tradition is a prison, but there are many things to learn from these traditional concepts, these traditional roles and stories. There are many things we can learn and take into the next era. And with martial arts, there are so many legends and stories about so many grandmasters and whatnot, and they're inspiring to be, well, if this person could do this before science, before knowledge of the human body and all that kind of stuff, they did it based off of just experience and intuition, then certainly with all of the tools and resources I have now, I can do this even better. Today, though, we see the role of the storyteller taking a much different scope. Books are still, quite popular, and now we have electronic books, which are a very large portion of the market. And we have fiction and nonfiction. We have, record keeping, and we have journalism, and we have storytelling, and so many genres of, fictional storytelling. And all of it is inspiring. And it's so full of a world of these stories that you can kind of just pick the flavors you like. It's like a buffet, you pick the flavors you like, and you absorb so much, and as you get used to that, you go, well, I'm looking for something different. Oh, I want to try this one out. Oh, I want to try this one out. And you realize it's not limited to just text, right? Movies are storytelling. Video games are storytelling. Tabletop games, card games, role-playing games, board games, it's all storytelling. Music, by far, is storytelling. You realize that bards and poets, these people who took things beyond just telling stories around a campfire, but put them into rhyme and verse, and with that musical influence behind it, it's another form of storytelling, and it is fantastic. I find that music speaks to me so much more than a fiction book. I've said before, and my wife and I battle over this constantly, I don't have a lot of personal use for reading fiction. And I do read some, but I don't read particularly fast. And I require a shutout of all other stimuli to read, because my brain is very scattered. And I need the focus, and anything that could possibly distract me will. It's very Murphy's Law. And with that kind of isolationist experience with it, it's hard for me to justify spending time on fiction when I could be spending it on information. I find much more value in information. But I do spend time on fiction. I watch a lot of anime and kung fu movies and science fiction movies. I'm a big fan of science fiction and steampunk. Oh, I love steampunk. But the fiction and fantasy part of my life is much more, either interactive through the occasional gaming or participation in in fiction type activities like comic book conventions and stuff like that, or it's very passive, like watching anime, where I can actually mill around the house. You realize I don't actually sit down to watch TV and movies and stuff like that. Like, I'm usually actively doing something else. I work out during them, I will clean the house while doing them, I will be carrying on a conversation with my wife or a guest, playing with the pets, playing my guitar, whatever. These passive forms of entertainment, like television and movies, are great, and I enjoy them, but I can't justify just sitting down and focusing on the one thing. It's just not something that my brain is ready to handle. But once again, it's not that I don't enjoy fiction, and I had this discussion with my wife just again the other day. It's not that I don't enjoy fiction, because I do. And she's a very good writer. She is a writer herself. I'll be right back. Let me show you. This is her book, God's Dream. It's a very political, philosophical book. Vampires, but not crappy vampires. I hate vampires, and I don't hate these vampires. That's my wife. But anyway, go check it out. It's on Amazon. You can get print copy or ebook. But my wife is a fiction writer. She is so involved in the world of fiction. She reads so many fiction novels, and she's a speed reader. She can finish 2 books in a day, whereas it takes me a day to finish 100 pages. So you can see the difference there. It's quite an investment for me to spend, and I would rather spend it on information rather than entertainment. For her, entertainment is very, very valuable, and not in this passive American her sense, but in the sense of it being catharsis and imagination. She's got so many things popping through her head. Her brain operates on so many what-ifs. That's the beauty of the role of the storyteller. There's so many what-ifs out there, and it's the role of the storyteller to not only report what is and what was, but to say, what if? And use their imagination and play. Because so many of us don't. So many of us get so confined by these ideas of what is, when many times we should be asking, what if? So I want you to just start thinking about that. Start asking the question, what if? So I've got a lot of what if questions in my head. I don't know if I'll ever do anything with them, and I'm not going to ask my wife to write them for me, but I get to play with it in my brain space. And for me, that's often good enough. Is it good enough for you? Or should you start writing your story? Or perhaps composing a piece of music. You realize an opera is a story. You realize that there are concept albums out there where, a group of 10 or 12 songs tells a story. It's a fantastic idea. Your story doesn't have to be confined to one thing. My story unfolds in martial arts and music and my imagination. My wife's story unfolds in pages of books. What's yours? That's all I'm going to leave you with today. I don't know what to now is, but there you go. And I'll talk to you next time. Good journey.